Picture this. The mansion you called home looms like a traitor, its oak doors slamming shut, locking you out forever. Your father, the man who swore you were his, snarls, "You're useless. You're no daughter of mine." His words rip your heart to shreds, each syllable a blade. His new wife sneers, her cold eyes mocking your tears, while their pampered son spits laughter, trampling your mother's memory. They stole everything, your home, your legacy, your name, erasing you like a stain they couldn't stand. Betrayal burns hotter than hell, a wound so deep it screams with every breath. They feast in that stolen mansion, built on your pain, thinking they've buried you. But they've made a mistake. You're not broken, you're a storm rising from their lies, ready to tear their world apart. Every scar they carved fuels your vow, they'll pay, they'll choke on their cruelty. Standing here, keys clutched in trembling fists, you're ready to burn their empire down. And this is how I clawed back the mansion they ripped from my soul. The oak doors of that Savannah mansion once swung wide open for me, welcoming me into a world I thought would last forever. Back then, I was just a kid, running across polished hardwood floors, the scent of magnolia blossoms drifting through the 12-foot windows. That 5,000 square foot colonial, with its spiral staircase and red brick walls, wasn't just a house, it was my sanctuary. I'd sit in the garden, 200 feet of blooming magnolias, listening to my adoptive mom, Clara, hum old hymns. She was a history teacher, her voice soft like Georgia summer rain, her hands always dusted with chalk. "You're my light, Emily," she'd say, braiding my hair on the porch swing. Clara adopted me at 3, and I never cared about my birth parents, her love was enough. My adoptive dad, Richard, was a retired Navy officer, his posture rigid as the flagpole in our yard. He'd polish his service medals every Sunday, 15 of them gleaming on the mantel. "Stand tall, Emily," he'd bark, but his rare smile felt like a medal of its own. We'd raise the American flag together, the rope creaking 20 feet up. "This is our honor," he'd say. They'd whisper I wasn't theirs by blood, but Clara would snap, "She's ours in every way that counts." Richard would nod, silent but firm. Sunday dinners were loud, Clara's laughter, Richard's war stories, my chatter about school 3 miles away. I felt untouchable, wrapped in their pride, in that mansion's embrace. But even stone cracks under pressure, and my world was about to shatter. I'm Emily Harper, and this was the family I thought would never break. The magnolia garden stopped blooming the day my world fell apart. I was 10 years old, standing in the kitchen of our Savannah mansion, the air thick with the scent of Clara's oatmeal cookies. She was humming her favorite hymn, her apron dusted with flour, when her hand froze mid-stir. The mixing bowl slipped, shattering on the tile floor, and Clara collapsed, her body crumpling like a fallen flag. "Mom!" I screamed, my voice echoing off the 12-foot ceilings. I dropped to my knees, shaking her, but her eyes were empty, her warmth already fading. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes, their boots scuffing the hardwood, but it was too late. "A heart attack," they said, sudden and merciless. Richard stood in the doorway, his navy-stiff posture unbroken, his face a mask of stone. He didn't cry, didn't touch me, just stared at the stretcher as they wheeled Clara away. That night, I sat on the porch swing, 200 feet from the silent house, clutching her scarf, its magnolia scent now a cruel ghost. The mansion felt like a tomb, its oak doors no longer welcoming but suffocating. Richard buried his grief in routine, polishing his 15 medals every Sunday, raising the flag 20 feet high, but his eyes never met mine anymore. "Eat your dinner, Emily," he'd say, his voice flat, like I was a cadet failing inspection. The house grew colder, its 5,000 square feet too vast for just us two. I'd wander the spiral staircase, tracing Clara's old chalk marks on the banister, whispering her hymns to keep her close. But whispers can't hold a family together. A year later, Richard brought Vanessa into our home, her heels clicking like gunfire on the hardwood. She was a corporate lawyer, all sharp suits and sharper smiles, her perfume a chemical assault that drowned out Clara's magnolias. "This place needs a woman's touch," she declared, tossing Clara's quilted cushions into storage. She painted the oak doors a sterile white, ripped out the garden's magnolia trees, claiming their petals, cluttered the 100-foot lawn. I stood frozen, watching the chainsaw tear through my mother's legacy, my fists clenched so tight my nails drew blood. Vanessa didn't yell or hit, she just erased me with surgical precision. At our first dinner together, she set the mahogany table for 3, herself, Richard, and an empty chair for their future. "Emily, grab a plate from the cabinet," she said, her voice dripping with dismissal. I ate alone in the kitchen, 3 feet from their laughter, my fork scraping against silence. Richard didn't correct her, didn't even look my way. When their son, Ethan, was born, the mansion became his kingdom. At his first birthday, 50 guests filled the backyard with balloons and a 6-foot cake, their coos of "he's perfect" echoing across the lawn. I stood at the window, 30 feet away, uninvited, my reflection a stranger in the glass. "He's the future of this family," Vanessa said to a guest, her words slicing through me. Richard nodded, his hand on Ethan's crib, as if I'd never existed. The house changed faster than my heart could bear. Clara's photos vanished from the hallway, replaced by Ethan's framed baby portraits. The mantel, once home to Richard's medals, now held Vanessa's crystal vases, their sharp edges glinting like her smile. "It's too cluttered," she said when I asked about Clara's things, her tone final. I'd sneak into Clara's old study, 15 feet down the hall, to hold her scarf, but even that room was stripped, its books donated, its warmth gutted. Richard grew more distant, his rare words cutting deeper. "Focus on school, Emily," he snapped when I lingered at his office door, 3 miles from the life we'd had. I was 11, then 12, shrinking in a house that no longer wanted me. The flag we'd raised together sagged in the wind, its rope fraying. I didn't know it yet, but the worst betrayal was still to come, waiting to shatter what little I had left. The white-painted oak doors of the Savannah mansion no longer creaked with welcome, they groaned like a warning. At 16, I was a ghost in my own home, haunting the 5,000-square-foot halls where Clara's laughter once echoed. The magnolia garden, now a barren 100-foot lawn, mocked my every step. Vanessa's crystal vases gleamed on the mantel, replacing Richard's 15 navy medals, while Ethan's toys littered the spiral staircase I used to trace with Clara's chalk. I clung to her memory, sneaking into her old study, 15 feet down the hall, to hold her scarf, its faint magnolia scent my only anchor. But even that was fading, just like me. I'd catch Richard's gaze sometimes, across the 20-foot dining room, but his eyes were empty, like a flagpole stripped of its colors. Vanessa's voice filled the void, sharp as her heels, dismissing me with every "Emily, don't linger." I was a stranger, 3 miles from the family I'd known. One humid August night in 2007, I couldn't sleep, the mansion's air conditioner humming 30 feet away. Driven by a desperate need to reclaim Clara, I crept to her study, my flashlight cutting through the dark. Under a loose floorboard, 10 inches from the desk, I found a locked tin box, its edges rusted. My hands trembled as I pried it open with a paperclip, revealing a folded document, Clara's will, dated 2002, a year before her death. My breath caught as I read, "This house, my heart, belongs to Emily Harper, my light." The mansion, its 12-foot windows, its red brick walls, was meant for me. Clara had promised I'd always have a home. But stapled behind it was a new document, signed by Richard in 2005, transferring the deed to him and Vanessa. My heart pounded, a 200-mile-an-hour storm in my chest. He'd erased Clara's wish, stolen my future. I clutched the papers, storming to Richard's office, 25 feet across the mansion. He sat under a dim lamp, reviewing files, his face as cold as the flagpole outside. Vanessa lounged nearby, sipping wine, her smirk glinting like her 3-carat ring. I slammed the will on his desk, my voice shaking. "Clara wanted me to have the house. Why did you change it?" Richard didn't flinch, his eyes narrowing like a commander facing a mutiny. "You're a burden, Emily. Useless. You're not my daughter." Each word was a bullet, tearing through the 13 years I'd called him Dad. Vanessa laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. "Don't be dramatic, Emily. You never belonged here." I staggered back, the room spinning, my fingers numb around Clara's will. I looked to Richard, pleading for a shred of the man who'd raised the flag with me, but he turned away, his silence louder than her laughter. I ran to my room, 40 feet up the spiral staircase, and stared into the mirror, my reflection a stranger at 5 feet 4 inches tall. What was I missing to be unworthy? Clara's scarf hung on my bedpost, but it couldn't answer. The pain was a black hole, swallowing every memory of porch swings and Sunday dinners 3 miles from this nightmare. I opened my drawer, pulling out Clara's silver locket, a 2-inch heart she'd given me at 8. "You're enough," she'd said. I snapped it shut, my resolve hardening. I packed a duffel bag, clothes, the locket, the will, and slipped out at midnight, the white oak doors slamming behind me, a 10-foot echo of finality. Rain soaked me as I walked 2 miles to the bus station, vowing never to beg for their love again. The mansion wasn't home anymore, it was a battlefield, and I'd return to claim it. The rain-soaked streets of Atlanta swallowed me whole that night in 2007, 2 miles from the Savannah mansion where Richard called me useless. At 16, I was a runaway, clutching Clara's silver locket and her will, my duffel bag slung over my 5-foot 4-inch frame. The bus station's neon lights buzzed 10 feet above, casting shadows as I bought a one-way ticket to Atlanta, 250 miles north. I landed in a 300-square-foot apartment above a greasy diner, the air thick with fryer oil and regret. My $5 an hour waitress job at a dive 3 blocks away barely covered rent, but every spilled coffee and rude customer hardened my resolve. Richard's words, "You're a burden, useless," looped in my head, a cruel soundtrack to my 12-hour shifts. But Clara's locket, its 2-inch heart warm against my skin, whispered back, "You're enough." I wasn't done fighting. One sleepless night, wiping tables at 2 a.m., I overheard a customer, a grizzled Air Force vet, talk about flying F-16s over 30,000 feet. Something clicked. I'd soar above Richard's lies, prove I wasn't the burden he saw. At 18, I marched into a recruiting office, my waitress apron stained with ketchup, Clara's locket tucked under my shirt. "I want to be a pilot," I said, my voice steady despite the recruiter's raised eyebrow. "You're 110 pounds soaking wet," he scoffed, pushing a 50-page form across the desk. I signed every page, my pen shaking but sure. Basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, 900 miles from Atlanta, was hell in 100-degree Texas heat. I ran 5-mile courses, my boots blistering my feet, and failed push-up drills, my arms buckling under my weight. Drill sergeants screamed, "Harper, you're dragging us down." Richard's, "Useless," echoing in their voices. I wanted to quit, to crawl back to that diner, but Clara's will, folded in my locker, kept me standing. At night, in a 200-square-foot barracks, I'd trace her handwriting, "This house belongs to Emily." I wouldn't let her down. Then I met Sarah Coleman, a 5-foot 8-inch recruit with a buzz cut and a smirk that could stop a tank. She caught me vomiting after a 6-mile run, my lungs burning. "Get up, Harper," she snapped, tossing me a water bottle from 10 feet away. "You're not here to cry." Sarah was a mechanic's daughter from Detroit, 22 years old, aiming for special forces. She didn't ask about my past, didn't care about my scars. When I froze during a 20-foot rope climb, she yelled, "Move, or I'll kick your ass myself." Her tough love was my lifeline. Flight school at Shepherd Air Force Base, 1,200 miles away, pushed me harder. I logged 200 hours in simulators, my hands cramping on the controls, and flew T-38 jets at 500 miles per hour, the sky a blur of freedom. Richard's voice faded with every 10,000-foot climb, but it never vanished. I graduated as a second lieutenant, my wings pinned on in 2013, 150 colleagues clapping in a 10,000-square-foot hangar. Sarah, now a staff sergeant, grinned from the crowd. "Not bad, fly girl," she said, tossing me a 12-ounce beer later. Now what? I didn't know, but I felt Clara's locket pulse against my chest. After 4 years flying C-130s over 15,000-mile missions, I left the Air Force in 2015, 24 years old, craving something permanent. Sarah, discharged after a knee injury, called me from Atlanta. "Let's build something," she said, her voice crackling over a 3,000-mile phone line. We rented a 400-square-foot office above a pawn shop, 5 miles from my old diner, and founded Skyguard, a defense tech startup. Our first prototype, a drone detection system scanning 50-mile radii, was coded on a 15-inch laptop, fueled by 20-ounce Red Bulls and rage. "This is our middle finger to the world," Sarah laughed, debugging at 3 a.m. We pitched to a Pentagon contractor in 2017, 30 suits staring us down in a 500-square-foot boardroom. "You're nobodies," one sneered. I leaned forward, Clara's locket hidden under my blazer. "We're the ones who'll save your ass at 30,000 feet, I shot back. We won a $2 million contract, our 10 employees cheering in our cramped office. Skyguard grew, but Richard's betrayal lingered, a 200-pound weight on my heart. I'd built a life 250 miles from that mansion, but Clara's will, now framed in my 12-square-foot cubicle, called me back. I wasn't useless, I was unstoppable. The Savannah mansion glittered under a January dusk in 2023, its 5,000-square-foot frame pulsing with the arrogance of a family that thought they'd won. I stood 200 feet from its white-painted oak doors, my breath steady, Clara's 2-inch silver locket burning against my chest. At 32, I wasn't the broken girl who fled this house 16 years ago, soaked by a 2-mile walk to the bus station. I was Emily Harper, co-founder of Skyguard, a defense tech empire built from 250 miles of grit and rage. For years, I'd tracked the mansion's fate, discovering Vanessa's LLC, Coastal Elite Holdings, drowning in $3 million of unpaid taxes. Skyguard's profits let me strike, buying the deed through a shell company, Harper Trust, registered 500 miles away in Delaware. I wired the mansion with our drone detection sensors, 20 feet above the lawn, turning their sanctuary into my chessboard. Tonight, at Richard's 65th birthday, I'd checkmate their lies. I pulled my rented black SUV, a 15-foot beast, into the 300-foot driveway, its gravel crunching under 35-inch tires. The backyard, once Clara's Magnolia Haven, was a 100-foot stage of excess, 50 guests in $5,000 suits and gowns, a 10-foot ice sculpture dripping under string lights, and a jazz quartet playing 30 feet from a champagne tower. The air reeked of grilled lobster and Vanessa's venomous perfume, a 10-foot radius of control. I stepped through the wrought iron gate, my tailored blazer hiding Clara's will, folded in my pocket. No one recognized me, my 5-foot, 4-inch frame blending with the crowd, but my pulse roared like a jet at 30,000 feet. Richard stood on a 15-foot stone patio, microphone in hand, his gray hair clipped, his navy posture rigid at 65. Vanessa, 55, glittered in a $10,000 dress, her 3-carat ring flashing. Ethan, now 18, 6 feet tall, smirked in a custom tux, his entitlement as sharp as his jawline. Richard's voice boomed, "Thank you for celebrating my 65 years. Vanessa, Ethan, my family, made this possible." The crowd clapped, 50 pairs of hands oblivious to my presence. He droned about his Navy days, 15 medals long gone, and his legacy, never mentioning Clara or me. Then his eyes locked on mine, 20 feet away. His jaw tightened, but he pressed on, "Let's raise a glass to the future." I stepped forward, heels clicking on stone, and handed him a sealed envelope, its 8-inch weight heavy with truth. "Happy birthday, Richard," I said, my voice cutting through the jazz. He took it, his fingers stiff, and tore it open. His face drained, eyes scanning the deed, property transferred to Harper Trust, owned by Emily Harper. The crowd hushed, 50 breaths held. I climbed the patio, seizing the microphone. "This mansion isn't yours," I said, my voice steady as a 500-mile-an-hour jet. "It was Clara's, meant for me. You stole it, Richard, with your lies and your new family. I bought it back, fair and square, for $4 million. Vanessa shrieked, "You're a fraud." Her wine glass shattered 5 feet away, red liquid pooling like blood. Ethan lunged, "You're ruining everything," but a guest held him back, 10 feet from me. Richard stared at the deed, his 200-pound frame slumping. "How he muttered, voice cracking. I waited, I said, facing the crowd. I built Skyguard, 250 miles from your betrayal. Clara's will, her truth, gave me this house. You called me useless, Richard. You said I wasn't your daughter. But I'm standing here, holding the keys. The crowd gasped, 50 whispers rippling. Vanessa's face twisted, this is our home. I turned to her, cold as Clara's grave. Not anymore. You erased me. Now I erase you. I held up the keys, their 3-inch glint a blade of justice, and walked off the patio, the mansion mine at last. The Savannah mansion stood silent under the February dawn, its 5,000 square foot frame no longer a battlefield but a canvas for something new. The white-painted oak doors, 10 feet tall, creaked as I stepped inside, Clara's 2-inch silver locket warm against my chest. At 32, I'd clawed back this house from Richard's lies, my $4 million purchase through Harper Trust, a blade of justice. The night of his 65th birthday, January 2023, still burned in my mind, Vanessa's shattered wine glass, Ethan's furious lunge, Richard's pale face as I held the keys 3 inches high. I'd given them 48 hours to leave, their 300-foot driveway crunching under movers' trucks as they vanished, 250 miles from my victory. The 100-foot lawn, stripped of Clara's magnolias, lay bare, but I saw possibility where they saw defeat. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about honoring Clara, the mother who called me her light 22 years ago. I walked the spiral staircase, 15 feet of polished wood, my fingers brushing the banister where Clara's chalk marks once lingered. The mansion's 12-foot windows poured light across the hardwood, but the air felt heavy, haunted by 16 years of betrayal. I'd built Skyguard 250 miles away in Atlanta, flown C-130s at 15,000 miles, but this house was my final mission. I called Rachel Nguyen, a 40-year-old social worker and Army veteran I'd met at a 500-square-foot veterans conference room in 2020. Rachel, I said, standing in the 200-square-foot kitchen where Clara collapsed, I have a house. Let's make it a home for women who've lost theirs. Her voice crackled over the 300-mile phone line. You're serious? I know 10 women sleeping in cars right now. I nodded, though she couldn't see. Bring them here. By March, we transformed the mansion into Clara's haven, a sanctuary for homeless women veterans. The 100-foot lawn bloomed again, 50 magnolia saplings planted by volunteers, their roots sinking 2 feet deep. The 10-foot dining room, once Vanessa's stage, became a communal table, its mahogany polished by women like Maria, a 45-year-old Marine veteran who'd lost her home 5 miles away. I haven't eaten like this since Kandahar, Maria said, her voice breaking as she served soup to 12 others. I hung Clara's will, framed in a 10-inch case, on the 15-foot hallway wall, its words, "This house belongs to Emily, a promise kept." In the attic, 50 feet above, I found Clara's journal, hidden in a 12-inch trunk, its pages yellowed since 2002. Emily, she wrote, you'll find your way home, no matter who tries to stop you. I sank to the floor, 30 feet from the skylight, tears falling for the first time since I was 16, Clara's love a 200-mile-an-hour wind in my chest. Rachel and I worked 14-hour days, securing a 501c3 status in a 20-square-foot office, 3 miles from City Hall. We hired 5 staff, veterans like us, and welcomed 15 women, their duffel bags lining the 25-foot foyer. This place feels alive, Rachel said, watching Maria laugh over a 6-foot garden bed. I nodded, my 5-foot, 4-inch frame lighter than ever. The mansion's 20-foot flagpole flew the American flag again, its rope taut, honoring Clara's memory and the women rebuilding here. Vanessa's crystal vases were gone, replaced by photos of our residents, 10-inch frames on the mantel where Richard's 15 medals once stood. Ethan's toys, once scattered 30 feet across the staircase, were donated, the space now a library with 200 books on healing. I didn't need Richard's approval or Vanessa's scorn, this was my legacy, 5,000 square feet of redemption. Clara's haven wasn't just a house, it was proof that pain could bloom into purpose, 100 feet at a time. The 5,000 square foot Savannah mansion, now Clara's haven, hummed with life under April's golden light, its 100-square-foot magnolia garden blooming 50 saplings strong. At 34, I stood on the 15-foot porch, Clara's 2-inch silver locket resting against my chest, her journal's words, "You'll find your way home," etched in my soul. 2 years after reclaiming this house in 2023, 250 miles from my Atlanta roots, I'd turned Richard's betrayal into a beacon for 25 women veterans. The white-painted oak doors, once a 10-foot barrier, now swung open for women like Maria, who'd found laughter 5 feet from our kitchen table. I'd faced Richard's venom, "You're useless," at 16, flown C-130s over 15,000 miles, built Skyguard, and bought this mansion for $4 million, but Clara's haven was my true victory, a 200-square-foot testament to love over lies. In March 2025, I received an email from Richard, sent from a 300-mile coastal town. His words trembled on my 15-inch laptop screen. "I was wrong, Emily. You're stronger than I ever was." Clara saw it. I sat in the 20-foot library, 10-inch photos of our residence on the mantel, and felt no rage, only closure. I didn't reply, but kept the email, a 12-byte weight lifted from my heart. Vanessa and Ethan, now 20, had vanished, their 300-foot driveway a memory of their defeat. I didn't need their apology. Clara's haven, with its 20-foot flagpole flying proud, was my answer to their cruelty. Here's what I learned, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall in a house I made home. First, define your worth. No one, not Richard, not the world, gets to call you useless. I flew jets at 500 miles per hour, you can build your own sky. Second, transform your pain. My scars, carved 16 years ago, became Clara's haven, a 5,000-square-foot refuge. Your wounds are raw material for something unbreakable. Third, find your people. Sarah, 250 miles away, and Rachel, 3 miles from here, became my family, not by blood but by choice. They lifted me when I fell 30,000 feet. Clara's haven isn't just a house, it's a promise that you can rise, 100 feet at a time, and build a legacy no one can steal. I'm Emily Harper, standing on the 15-foot porch of Clara's haven, the 5,000-square-foot Savannah mansion I fought to reclaim. The 100-square-foot magnolia garden blooms behind me, 50 saplings stretching 2 feet toward the sky, a testament to the 25 women veterans who call this home. At 34, I've carried Clara's 2-inch silver locket through 16 years of betrayal, from Richard's venomous, "You're useless," to building Skyguard 250 miles away in Atlanta. This house, once a 10-foot prison of Vanessa's sneers and Ethan's entitlement, now pulses with hope, its 20-foot flagpole flying proud. My story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's been told they don't belong, who's walked a 2-mile road of pain to find their strength. If my fight moved you, hit that like button to honor Clara's memory, 22 years after her light guided me home. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone 3 miles or 300 miles away, fighting their own battles. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been called worthless? How did you rise? I read every word, every story, in my 20-square-foot office here. Subscribe and ring the bell to join our community, where we share raw stories of redemption every week. Next Tuesday, a new tale of revenge will drop, one that'll shake you 30,000 feet high. Let's build a family, not of blood, but of fighters. You're enough, Clara would say. So are you.